Episode 72 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of what I should maybe call this segment, of course, El Mahatat Tarjama. Yes, we've got a new Arabic episode for you today, and we've got a statement that was done by Iraq a few days ago. So at the UN at the moment, it's all quite busy. I've got quite a lot of work at the moment on it these days. So they've got the human rights count, quite a long session for maybe about a month or something like that. So they just started on Monday, and like the first big sort of agenda item is the annual report by the Office of the High Commissioner. OHCHR, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who is Michelle Bachelet. And she presents the report, and then all the countries come back and make their sort of, say what they think about it, set out their sort of positions. So as I say, for today, I've decided to go with something by Iraq. I'm going to do the usual way. I'll start with my waiver, of course, that I'm just doing this just for my own personal development in Arabic. I'm going to look at some of the, the constructions the Iraqis use, and I'm going to suggest solutions that might or might not come in useful for you Arabic A's, English B's. It's up to you whether you wish to take on board some of the things I say or not. Call it, if you like, a sort of take it or leave it exercise. So I'm going to put out what I know, and if you hear stuff that maybe I get wrong or that can be improved on, you stick it in the comments box down below. I love to get input from you guys. It helps me, and I think it sort of helps everyone sort of expand our knowledge a little bit on the subject. And also, if you're down there, if you're down by the comments, you may as well just sort of click subscribe as well. Why not? Okay, so I'm going to share the screen with you. So as you can see, then, we're in the 47th session of the Human Rights Council. This is item 2, the annual report by the High Commissioner. So as I say, the acronym we like to go for with is OHCHR. That's the most probably straightforward way of doing it in English. Okay, so this was delivered this was on Monday. Okay, so let's get into the meat of the statement, as it were. Okay, so you should see the statement up on your screens now. So what I've put in green is really more for my own convenience, so that I can just follow what those sections, those phrases that I think are most interesting from an interpreter's point of view. So let's see what I've highlighted here. Okay, so starting off here, للتعزيز واحترام حقوق الإنسان. So this is a classic set phrase, really, certainly when it comes to the Human Rights Council, the idea of human rights, and it's a set expression. You don't really want to play around with this at all. I'm sure I've said this on many occasions in many different videos. It is, of course, promotion and protection of human rights. When you're going into English, don't try and mess around with that. Just keep it as that. The two P's, easy to remember. P and the P, promotion and protection of human rights, and then you can just carry on. So, but it's very important to get that set phrase right. Okay, now moving on to here. التحديات التي فرضتها جائحة كورونا. So I've highlighted this just because of, I guess, this word فرضتها. Okay, so when we talk about challenges, just again, the standard collocation in English is posed. The challenges posed by the corona the corona pandemic. Okay, so don't, if you're if you're maybe newer to the Korea, there might be this temptation to try and do do something with faradateha to make it an exact replication in English, like the challenges imposed by the pandemic. No, okay, so the collocation with challenge in English is just posed. So yeah, sometimes you just have to step back a little bit from the original and think to yourself what sounds most natural in English, and there'll be further examples of that as we go along, actually. And again, another thing I always say in my broken record fashion is with the coronavirus, anything to do with the coronavirus, COVID pandemic, you don't, again, I just tend to often say just COVID, the challenges posed by COVID or the challenges posed by the pandemic. Again, everyone knows there's only, as I say, one pandemic in town. There's only one COVID. Well, there's 19 of them actually, aren't there? But everyone knows which one you're talking about. So again, don't feel you're obliged to copy exactly if they say the coronavirus pandemic, that you have to say the coronavirus pandemic. Just keep it simple. If the speaker's going fast. That's the thing. If the speaker's going fast, just keep it simple, all right? And just say COVID. Okay. بالولايات, so down here now. بالولايات المنوطة به. Okay, so again, this is sort of, again, an expression where you shouldn't feel obliged, again, if you're in a hurry, to stick, to adhere strictly to the exact words that are in the original. So, I mean, you can say, in order to carry out or in order to discharge the mandate entrusted to it, which is fine. You can say that, the mandate vested in it, the mandate entrusted to it. Or you could just say something like to carry out its mandated activities. Again, if you're going fast and you just need to get something out so that you can keep up with the rest of the sentence, if you say that, it means exactly the same thing, just, so it can carry out its mandated activities. It comes down to the same thing, all right? Don't feel you have to, as I say, be 100% faithful to the wording of the original. And then, okay, these workshops, ورشات عمل بشأن مشاريع القوانين. Okay, so I've highlighted that just because a good solution here, a very, very quick solution for that expression is a bill. Okay, when we're talking about sort of domestic laws, their first sort of incarnation, if you like, is as a bill. Now, you can say a draft law. That's also perfectly fine. But if you really want to get something out just very fast, just a bill. So these workshops are on these these workshops on these bills that the government, the Iraqi government, intends to, and I've highlighted this word again because you want a few synonyms for this idea, tashri'a, to enact, to adopt, okay, to promulgate, if you really want something fancy. But anyway, it's good to have 3 or 4 of those sort of synonyms there. By the way, I should have mentioned perhaps at the start, so at the end, once I've gone through it, I'm going to do a sort of sight translation, just a read through of the whole text, where I'll cover any of the sort of more minor points that I've skipped, perhaps in between the green parts. So you'll get a good overview at the end of how I would do this, how I would render this text as a whole. So, okay, we got to مكافحة الإرهاب. So I've just highlighted this because, again, this is one of these important collocations, almost a set phrase. So, it's to counter terrorism in the context of countering terrorism. You can say to combat terrorism as well. But the nicest, shall we say, the nicest collocation with terrorism is to counter terrorism. Okay, then this clause here, I had just a couple of quick things I'd highlighted. العراق مقبل على إجراء انتخابات مبكرة. So I've highlighted مقبل على. Just okay. So I guess the standard solution might be Iraq is about to do whatever it is, to hold elections in this case. So another expression that you might hear that you can use in English, and also that you might hear coming the other way, is poised to. Okay, that's a slightly higher register. Iraq is poised to hold انتخابات مبكرة, early elections or snap elections. That's why I've highlighted مبكرة here. Just so you've got, again, a couple of synonyms there to work with. So you could, as I say, a very high register way of doing that would be Iraq is poised to hold snap elections. Now, this whole sentence is a very long sentence, actually, and I find a lot of stuff in here that's very interesting. Yeah, I feel a bit sorry for you Arabic speakers at times. having to work with these enormous, great sentences. As I say, sometimes we have a similar problem in Spanish. Latin American Spanish, they really like to have these long sentences, but I don't think they quite reach the same. Even they don't quite hit the same level as some of the Arabic speakers. And so it was fascinating for me to see how to break this sentence down, especially some aspects of it remind me the syntax structure. There's things that remind me of Russian a lot. Okay, so let's have a look, especially this first bit. Okay, that I've highlighted. The first thing I would perhaps say is that I would maybe immediately put a full stop after the mubakira. I think that's a good, obvious. When you hear that "haythu," I'd say that's a good sign. Okay, just end the sentence there. Iraq's poised to hold early elections, and then just carry then with a new sentence, starting with, for example, here. Now, what I see as the problem in this sentence is the verb. Okay, it's come at the start. Takallalat. Now, what has what's been crowned? What's culminated? The problem here, it's a very long thing that's been culminated, right? It's the efforts of the Iraqi government to guarantee. I'm going to come to this a bit later afterwards. Okay, the integrity, transparency, and freedom of the elections. Okay, that's a long time to be remembering that word. تكللت. And again, if you're under pressure, if you're feeling a bit stressed, I could imagine that would cause difficulties. And this sentence structure, as I say, is similar to sometimes what we get in Russian. Really, if you the most natural, the best sounding English, I guess, when rendering this sentence would be to say the efforts of the Iraqi government to guarantee the integrity, transparency, and freedom of the elections was crowned. So, as I say, you've got to remember that was crowned or culminated. It culminated for a long time. And so, one thing we do in Russian, if we're under stress like that, is we turn, rather than keeping that tekallalat as a verb, we make our lives a bit easier. We turn it immediately into a noun. And then we don't have to store it in our memory for a long time. Now, what that means is the English doesn't sound quite as smooth, doesn't sound quite as natural, but it does get the meaning across. And sometimes that can be more important. You can try and go for the A plus solution where you store the verb and then you get to the end of that, the transparency, the integrity, and freedom, and then you've forgotten the word. What was the verb? What was the verb? So a sort of plan B, a contingency plan, is always to just immediately stick that verb, make it a noun. So that means we would say something along the lines of, so there was the culmination of the efforts of the Iraqi government to guarantee the integrity, transparency, and freedom of the elections with the approval or with the adoption by the Council of Ministers. Okay, so you turn it into a "there was" sentence. All right, there was culmination of their efforts, blah blah blah, with the adoption. Again, doesn't sound as nice as saving the takallalat. Doesn't sound as nice as saying where the efforts of the government to guarantee the free, fair elections was crowned with the adoption. Does sound nicer in English, but again, you're playing safe. It means you don't take the risk of losing the takallalat. Okay, so that's just that's something that, again, a challenge that we are often faced with in Russian. Now, then, why did I highlight this bit here? The نزاهتها وشفافيتها وحريتها. Now, the reason I highlighted that is so. Okay, so literally, it's talking about the integrity, the transparency, and the freedom of the elections of the Ha. The first thing is, I think you have to in English. It helps if you put in there, throw in the word elections again, so that the listener knows exactly what you're talking about. It's maybe more clear in the Arabic that the ha refers to the elections, but I think in English you would want to put in there was culmination of the government's efforts to guarantee the integrity, transparency, and freedom of the elections. I think if you just say freedom of them, if you just say if you just do it the same way as it's in the Arabic, if you say of them, your listener might be thinking, what's he referring to? Who's the them again? That's as a native English speaker, that would be my inclination. I'd be like, hang on, what's he talking about? Who are the them? So again, I think you'd want to maybe throw in the of the elections. The other reason I highlighted this bit is these are very specific words, okay? Integrity, transparency, freedom of elections. Now, there's again a very much a set phrase that's used often in the media at the UN, talking about fair, free, and transparent elections. So again, I repeat, if you're under pressure and the speaker's going very fast, and he reels off this set of three nouns in this case: integrity, transparency, freedom. Maybe you miss one, okay? At this point, it's useful just to know that package, fair, free, and transparent, okay? Because okay, you've got the transparent in there, you've got the free in there. Now, integrity and fair, it's pretty much the same thing, I would say. So it's a very good set phrase just to know, okay? The fair, free, and transparent elections, and I think that would do perfectly for this phrase. Okay, moving on here. Now, this is all to support the work of المفوضية العالية المستقلة للانتخابات. So again, this is a very specific name for this institution, this Iraqi institution. So I looked it up on I Googled it to see what this specific name was, and so I found, okay, it's called the Independent High Electoral Commission. Now, again, you might be struggling to get the exact wording of that commission right. And if you are, I mean, what's most important here is that it's an electoral commission, okay? It's the body that oversees the elections. So sometimes, again, if you have a sort of potentially tricky name of an institution, it's always good just to have, to know what to say, give it a sort of generic name where, okay, you're not getting the exact right wording, the exact nomenclature, but it gets the message over to the listener of what that institution, what field it works in. So, a typical just generic expression for that sort of institution would be like the National Electoral Commission. Okay, we know it's not actually called the National Electoral Commission, but again, the listener's going to know exactly what he's talking about, and the listener probably doesn't really care if the exact name of that institution is the Independent High Electoral Commission. Okay, and then at the bottom of this page, so I highlighted this bit, تمثل إرادة الناهب. Again, this is one of those cases where a beginner, you might think you have to completely replicate the source meaning, okay, of the verb. Okay, so it's obviously basically the electoral will. Now, I guess if you're going to do it like a like-for-like rendering of this expression, it would be that it represents the will of the Iraqi electorate. Now, in English, we're more likely to talk about reflecting the will of the Iraqi electorate, or the embodying, okay, embodying or reflecting. That's a good collocation to know. It's very important to know these collocations. There's something to be said even for when you've got these new words. It's more important, in addition to remembering the new word, for example, also learn what the sort of most natural collocation in English is to go with it, so that you're not, as soon as you hear the will of the electorate, you immediately know, okay, it's reflecting the will of the electorate or embodying it. You represent the will of the electorate sounds okay, but I think a sort of an English I probably wouldn't say that myself in regular conversation. And we're almost at the end here. So then I highlighted here, okay, ثقة مستدامة, بناء ثقة مستدامة, building trust or building confidence. And so again here a sort of collocation. Let's say we go with trust here for ثقة. Lasting trust, I think, is better than sustainable trust. Sustainable. I mean, I know for Mustadama, you've got the Sustainable Development Goals. الأهداف التنمية المستدامة. So when it comes to development, yeah, you want sustainable development. But when it comes to concepts like trust or confidence, peace, okay, you want lasting peace, lasting trust, lasting confidence. It's better. I mean, you can go with sustainable, and it would be very forgivable if that was the first word that sprang to mind, and no one would hold it against you. But it's better. Lasting is better in that context. And now it's interesting. This very last bit of the statement. Again, this is classic sort of Human Rights Council language. This finale here. And he talks, about the most important principles that should underpin the work of the Human Rights Council, of the work of OHCHR. And I'm not going to. A couple of these words are rather difficult to pronounce, so I might, I might just leave the pronunciation out. But again, so words they often talk about in this context are things like the work of the council. It needs to be its work needs to be based on objectivity, non-selectivity, and non-politicization or depoliticization. Okay. So again, for the Russians, we'll always talk about this. Again, this is very similar to a statement the Russians might deliver in many ways. And I realized that this word al-hiyad could also be neutrality, and that's not a bad. That could work as well. You want a few of these words. Again, you want a set of about 4 that you can sort of throw in. Objectivity, neutrality, impartiality, non-selectivity, non-politicization. Another thing they often refer to, not in this instance, but is avoiding double standards. Okay, so yeah, you want a few of the when the delegation reels off 3 of these ideas, you want to have again a few of those words that you can draw on. So I mean, the ones that would most naturally come to me here would be objectivity, non-selectivity, and non-politicization. Okay, all right. So that takes us. That's us. Those are the most interesting parts of the statement for me. So to conclude, I'm going to give you a run through a sort of sight translation, and I can highlight any other little interesting points that came up along the way. Okay, so let's get cracking here. So okay, thank you, President. So just general knowledge, the Human Rights Council has a president. And another little thing, by the way, often it can be difficult these days to know who's actually presiding a meeting or who's chairing a meeting. It's all done so remotely. Okay, so in this instance, the speaker says, "Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam President." Sometimes it's one of the vice presidents chairing who might be a male. I just play safe. I just say president, even if it's like a vice. Okay, I just say president, and then don't worry about it. There's so many other things to worry about doing these statements that shouldn't be something to add to your already existing woes. So I just say president. Thank you, President. Iraq commends the activities of OHCHR. Again, I'm just skipping that, to be honest, because in English you can just say you don't need to say the activities carried out by OHCHR. You can just say, Iraq commends the activities of OHCHR, or maybe you want to give her the full name, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. It's the first time you're referring to her. Although, again, you're quite well into the debate by this point, so I think you can also go straight in with OHCHR. And we appreciate the cooperation of OHCHR with Iraq in numerous fields when it comes to promoting and protecting human rights in spite of the challenges posed by the pandemic. President. Or sometimes, again, I say this many times, like a broken record. If you're under pressure, I just sometimes will skip that altogether and just take a deep breath. Okay, we know the delegation's addressing the president, so we don't need to keep repeating it. So Iraq is cooperating with OHCHR. Now, why did I say this? Okay, it says, okay, literally, Hukuma Biladi, my country's government is cooperating. Again, we know that it's Iraq speaking. Sometimes to save me, I know you in some of the Arabic delegations like to say Wafd Biladi, my country's delegation. It's a bit of a mouthful to say all that in English, to be honest. And I often find it's just easier to just repeat the name of the country, Iraq. And just when you say Iraq, it's implicit that you're talking about the government. So Iraq is cooperating with OHCHR in Baghdad and providing facilities and support that's needed. This is interesting. This little thing here. I'm not expecting that. You may be not expecting that a lezemin. So you don't need to suddenly correct yourself and go and providing the facilities and support. And then you hear a lezemin and say, "Oh no, is providing the necessary facilities and support." You don't have to correct yourself like that. What you just do is providing the facilities and support that's needed to carry out its mandated activities. And one of the aspects, and so here's an opportunity, by the way, where I would put a full stop, by the way, start a new sentence. One of the aspects of cooperation was the holding of workshops on bills that the government intends to enact. By this point, you know you're talking about Iraq. Everyone knows you're talking about Iraq. So there's not going to be any other government, you know, when he says al-hukuma al-Iraqiyya, you don't have to say Iraq again. We know he's a representative of the government. We know it's all about Iraq, okay? So you can just say the government or my government, such as the bill on protecting diversity, as referred to in para 109 of the report. Qaid al-Nikash, so under discussion, or so you could just say before us if you're again in a hurry. It doesn't really. This is a sort of bit of a throwaway phrase, isn't it? Just the report before us, or the report we're discussing, and a bill on protection from domestic violence. Okay, so like. There's also the concept of marital violence in English, but I think it's more natural to say domestic violence, as well as holding workshops on bolstering human rights in the context of countering terrorism. Okay, now we come to this big sentence here. So Iraq is poised to hold snap elections. There was the culmination of the efforts of the Iraqi government to guarantee fair, free, and transparent elections with the adoption by Parliament. This was actually what I was going to point out here. Majlis al-Nawab al-Iraqi. So the official name, the official translation of this institution into English is the Council of Representatives of Iraq. Again, so it's a slightly technical name, and perhaps you're not 100% certain what the exact name is. So again, you can sort of use a slightly generic name. You can just say the Iraqi Parliament, okay? Or you could say the Iraqi Lower House. Although I do see, having done a little bit of reading, apparently that Iraq has a unicameral parliament. They don't have an upper house. They just have the lower house, this Council of Representatives. But again, if you have a very technical, specific name used for an institution like that, and you don't quite catch the finer points of it, like the fact it's called a council, you know, you can just say the parliament, or again, the lower house. So with the adoption by the Iraqi parliament of a new electoral law, and this supports the work of the National Electoral Commission And here again, I'd be tempted to stick a full stop and just carry on by saying there was also the request from Iraq to the Security Council and to the Arab League. Again, you don't have to see the League of Arab States for Jamia al-Dawla al-Arabiya. You can just call it the Arab League to monitor the elections. And this reflects the commitment of the Iraqi government to hold free elections that reflect the will of the electorate for a better future. So I think, again, for here, Madda Haras, I think the best way of just reflecting that is just the commitment of the government, the government's keenness. Commitment's generally a good word for these kinds of things. And then turning to the final page. So the final page, so continuing cooperation with OHCHR and other countries requires efforts at building lasting trust. And this last little bit here, Hadha al-Amr marhoon. So if you're really in good form and you want to really hit that register, the nicest way of saying that in English is perhaps, and this is predicated on the need. This is predicated on commitment to principles of human rights, universally accepted human rights principles, and objectivity, non-selectivity, and depoliticization. Now, but to get for that predicated, I would struggle as a native English speaker to get that word predicated on something. It's good for me to say that word to you, so that you recognize it in future, and maybe you can use it at some point. But again, sometimes you just have to settle for the slightly inferior option that still gets across the meaning just fine. And you could say here, and this requires a commitment to universally recognized human rights principles. Okay. Universally recognized human rights principles. Again, that's a bit of a set phrase. You might not know that it was going to go in that. Maybe you're just going to think, once you've heard Biltizam, Mubadi, Hukuk al-Insan, you might think that's going to be it. A commitment to human rights principles. Okay, and then you could say that are universally recognized, or you can add emphasis. You don't want to sound as though you're correcting yourself. That's one of the sort of tricks, obviously, in interpreting. You want everything that you say to come out smoothly, as though you're not really sort of stopping, correcting, and going on. You could say something along the lines of, and this requires commitment to human rights principles, universally recognized human rights principles, and objectivity, non-selectivity, etc. See, the way I say it that time, it doesn't look like I'm correcting myself. It just looks like I'm adding greater emphasis. So it's, sometimes this game, interpretation, it's a bit of a confidence trick sometimes. You're trying to fool the listener into thinking that you are just reeling all this off very smoothly without any great difficulty. And these are just some of the little techniques to help you to create that impression, at least. Okay, well, that's that. I hope that has been helpful. Hopefully you've learned a couple of new things there. I know I've learned a few new words. It's always fun preparing these things because I get to enhance my knowledge of Arabic a little bit. So yeah, if you have enjoyed it, please do press the like button. If you have colleagues, friends who you think would enjoy the show, will benefit from it, also please do share it with them. Please do subscribe. That's the only price. That's the only price Interpretation Station charges. That's all we ask for. Just press the subscribe button, and it makes me very happy. Very happy. Yeah. So that's it. So with that, I wish you all a good rest of the week, a good weekend, and I'll see you very soon. And I'm hoping that for the next episode with Arabic, I'm trying to recruit, as it were, one of my colleagues from the Arabic booth at the UN. We're going to do a collab. It's very much on the cards, so that's going to be really good. That's going to be a really interesting show, I think. So stay tuned. Yeah. All right. All the best for now. Ila liqa. And yes, episode 72 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.